Good evening, everybody. We're just going to wait a couple of more minutes to give everybody a chance to join, and then we will get started. All right. Good evening, and thank you for joining us. I'm Darla Pompilio of Your Tasks, Our Time, Senior Mood Management and Professional Organizing. The goal of our presentation tonight is to learn how to plan for pets if you are a loved one or no longer able to care for them. This webinar pairs an estate attorney with an SPCA director to discuss powers of attorney, pet trusts, private placements, and shelters or sanctuaries. Our organization is Senior Services Network of Southeastern PA. We started Senior Services Network because most people are not sure where to begin when navigating resources and often don't know what resources are needed until something happens. We are a group of professionals focused on providing services to seniors. Our goal is to be one place where seniors, caregivers, and families can have access to service providers in the Southeastern Pennsylvania area. So tonight, I'd like to introduce our speakers, our two speakers. We're going to start with Linda Reider. Linda Reider is the Executive Director of Bucks County SPCA in Pennsylvania, a nonprofit organization that operates 2 full-service, no time limit animal care centers, investigates animal cruelty countywide, provides 24-hour emergency stray rescue, offers subsidized cat sterilization, and reaches into the diverse communities of the county to improve the lives of animals and people. Linda holds BS and MS degrees, plus a certificate in nonprofit business and management, and has held various positions in the animal welfare field for the past 36 years. We also have with us this evening, Dianne Magee, Esquire of Biehn and Thatcher. She's a graduate of Stanford University and Duke University School of Law. Dianne Magee has been a trusted legal advisor and counselor, serving the estate planning, estate administration, estate and trust litigation needs of Southeastern Pennsylvania residents and their families for over 36 years. With a background of almost 20 years as a solicitor for the Bucks County Area Agency on Aging, Dianne has special concern for and knowledge of our challenges and needs as we age, and she seeks in particular to protect senior citizens from financial exploitation. Dianne is a good listener and a practical problem solver who is able to explain complex legal concepts in ordinary English. Whether your planning involves a basic will, power of attorney, or medical directive, or more complicated trust, or if a loved one is ill or has died, Dianne will work with you and your family to guide you to your best outcomes. So before we start, or before our speakers begin, I want to invite those who have questions for the panelists to please add those questions to the chat. After both speakers have completed their presentations, we will then go to your questions. So ladies, I'll stop share and you can take it away.
Great. Thank you so much for that great introduction, Darla. I'm going to get us started here. Here we go. Start from beginning. Here's the beginning. What to do with mom's pet. We're really glad to be here tonight. It's an important topic. It could be mom's pet, could be dad's pet. It could be your own pet that we are talking about. And the question on our minds is, what happens when you are no longer there or no longer able to care for your animal companion? We want to encourage people to plan ahead for pets. And we also want to help people who may have inherited pets and now don't know quite what to do with them. So we're good. This will be a 2-part presentation, and Dianne is going to start us off planning ahead for your pets with an attorney.
Thanks a lot, Linda. And good evening to everyone. It's my pleasure to be here tonight. I'm especially honored to be speaking with Linda Reider, who is the Executive Director of the Bucks County SPCA and is the most knowledgeable person about animal welfare in all of Bucks County and probably a much larger area. And I know this because I am also very honored to work with Linda on the Bucks County SPCA board, where I'm the president. And she is a wealth of knowledge and is always on the job, often 24/7, taking care of all kinds of animals in Bucks County that need our help. So I'm going to be the first part of the presentation, which I know is not the most exciting part tonight. You're going to be a lot more interested, I think, in what Linda has to tell you with her knowledge and share with you. But I'm going to talk about what I think is a really important topic and seems to be a growing in importance topic, at least that I see in my practice day to day. And that is concern for making sure that our pets, who most of us do consider to be members of our family, are taken care of when we're no longer able to take care of them. And that can be either during our lifetime, if we were to become incapacitated, mentally incapacitated, physically incapacitated, or upon our deaths. So I know these are not our most favorite topics, and clients I know always avoid trying to come to me to talk to them. It's a favorite thing to procrastinate on, but very important when we're talking about incapacity and death. I promise we're not going to talk about taxes tonight, though. We'll skip that topic. So I'd like to talk about two vehicles that are very useful for anyone in planning to make sure that your pet, your loved family member, is always going to be cared for, even if you can't do it yourselves. And let's first talk about, and we'll go to the next slide, please, Linda. Thank you. Let's talk about the first type of legal document, and that's what I'm going to call a durable power of attorney. This is a financial power of attorney because even though we think of pets as family members, under the law, pets are considered to be property. Yeah, that's cold and cruel, but we're going to deal with them in a warm way in our legal documents. So what is a durable power of attorney? Well, durable is this magic word in the law that just says the power of attorney does what we really want it to do. And that is, we want it to survive your incapacity when you're no longer able to make and communicate responsible decisions for yourself during your lifetime. You're still alive. But it's a document, a written document that you sign that appoints an individual who's named an agent to make any type of financial decision for you if you're not able to make that decision for yourself. And why is a power of attorney a really important document to have? It avoids your family members or people who care about you having to go to court to have someone called a guardian appointed for you if you become incapacitated. So if a power of attorney is a really critical document to have, because yeah, I'm an attorney, but I want to tell you, you don't want to go to court. You want to avoid that expense, that time, that procedure that can take away your ability to make decisions for yourself, can take away your independence and your self-determination in having you declared to be incapacitated and appointing someone that may not be the person that you would want if you made the decision for yourself to make these important decisions for you. A person called a guardian, a stranger, a judge would make that decision for you if you didn't have your own power of attorney. So let's talk specifically now about how a power of attorney can be utilized to help make decisions or help someone else make decisions about your pets. Usually we are talking about a pretty comprehensive power of attorney. We would like that power of attorney to be able to address any situation that might be necessary to act in your best interests, in your family members' best interests, including your pets, if you can't act for yourself. And sitting here today, we don't know exactly what might be needed in the future if that time were to come, because things change. Our lives are fluid. So we don't know. So it's good to make the power of attorney pretty broad and comprehensive to address any possible situation, and also to avoid the necessity of having to go into court to have a guardian appointed for some situation that you might have forgotten to address. I think it's good to make the power of attorney broad and comprehensive. Will it apply to your pets? Sure. In general, it will, even if you don't specifically state that it's going to, or expressly state that it's going to apply to your pets, because again, your pets are considered to be assets. And the power of attorney is going to address what happens to your assets. But do you want to put specific language in there out of concern for your pets to make sure they're treated in a certain way? That's a good idea. Good idea to think about that, add a paragraph on that. It's a good idea to make sure your agent knows about your specific concerns about your pets. Do you want to name your pets? Well, maybe you could name the pets you have right now, but again, things are fluid, they're changing. You probably, even if you're going to name the current pets, you want the power of attorney, just as it would to other assets, for example, real estate, to apply to anything you might acquire in the future, new friends you make as pets. So you want it to be general that way and address the pets that you have now, and perhaps pets that I may acquire in the future. And let's go to the next slide, please. Do you want to specify a certain amount of money in the power of attorney to take care of your pets? That's a tricky thing to do, because again, we don't know how much money might be needed to take the best care of your pets at that time. We don't know in the future. It's hard to predict exactly what the care your pets will need, what condition they'll be in. We also don't know what the value of money may be in the future. And I see this a lot in my practice where people, especially in their wills, for example, want to leave a certain amount of money for a certain purpose. And hey, $1 today may only be worth 50 cents in the future. And you may not leave enough money because we all know that we're suffering through a period of inflation right now. So again, it's probably better to be flexible and more general. The most important thing, who do you want to name as the person called your agent who's going to make these significant decisions for you? You always want to name someone that you can absolutely trust, who will act in your best interest and in accordance with your known expectations about all your finances, and especially about your pets. So you probably want to name somebody who has an interest in pets. Now, will the agent who's handling your finances necessarily be the same person who's going to be the caregiver for your pets? Not necessarily, but that's an important thing to think about. And that person, if you don't trust that person to know when the time is appropriate to act for you, then you shouldn't be naming that person. If you have any questions about the reliability of the individual that you're naming as agent, don't name that agent. It's got to be someone you can absolutely trust at all times to do what's right, and importantly, to do what you want that person to do. And then how do you prepare your power of attorney? I can tell you, there are a lot of forms online. If you'd like to just go Google it, or look at a particular website for legal forms. Those forms vary tremendously. I will caution you that the law is different from state to state and can be dramatically different in the area of estate planning. So a power of attorney that's good in one state may not be recognized in another state. Pennsylvania in particular has very specific forms that it requires: the very first page, the notice that's on the power of attorney, and then an acknowledgement that's signed by the agent. And if those aren't right, the power of attorney isn't going to be workable. So it's always a good idea. And I know I'm an attorney, but I'm not trying to speak from self-interest. It's always a good idea to consult with an attorney and not just try to prepare the power yourself or the particular document yourself using an online form. Some of the forms are a little confusing, and without the legal experience or the knowledge of the verbiage, you may not be answering the questions the way that is most desirable to answer them. Furthermore, an attorney knows the questions that need to be specifically addressed and answered under Pennsylvania law that are important to place into your power of attorney. the attorney knows the consequences of the choices you make in deciding what provisions to put in your power of attorney and how to state them. So again, I think it's a good idea to consult with an experienced estate planning attorney who's licensed to practice law in Pennsylvania. Now, the power of attorney will end with your death. So let's talk about the next vehicle. And thank you, Linda. That's very useful and something to consider. A newer vehicle available in Pennsylvania. Powers of attorney have been around and recognized for hundreds of years, but pet trusts are relatively new. And these are actually called trust for the care of an animal. Under the law, Pennsylvania tends to be a pretty conservative state with respect to its laws. Sometimes change is a four-letter word in Pennsylvania. So it wasn't until 2006 that Pennsylvania did become the 32nd state in the union to adopt the Uniform Trust Act that allows for trusts for pets. Before that, you could leave money for a pet in a document, but it wasn't legally enforceable if the individual wasn't carrying out their duties. So now pet trusts are recognized, and they are important tools to consider when we're thinking about the best care for our animals well, both before our deaths and after our deaths. I know the word trust sometimes sounds kind of scary. It seems like it's complicated. We think of trust fund babies, that maybe trusts are only for wealthy people, but they're not. A trust is actually a pretty simple legal document. It's an agreement in which the person who's called the settlor or the grantor, setting up the trust, designates an individual, or it can be a bank, a financial institution, to serve as a trustee, another type of what I'm going to call fiduciary, whose job it is to act on behalf of another. So the trust is this document that's naming the trustee, kind of similar to the agent under a power of attorney, and it's then defining what the trustee's authority and what the trustee's duties are. And a trust needs to be funded. So a trust is a financial document that's directing how money are going to be used for specific purposes. A pet trust can be created while you're still alive, or you can wait and create it to take effect after you die. If you create a trust during your lifetime, that may take the place of provisions in a power of attorney for a pet. But there's things to think about if you want to create a trust that's still going to be effective during your lifetime. That might provide for a good transition if something happens to you, so that there's no interim period between your incapacity or your death and someone immediately having the money to take care of your pet. But it's going to be a little bit of an expense. It's going to take some time, and you'll have to divest yourself, take away some of your own money and put it into this fund, this trust fund that might not be used right away for your pet. So I find in my practice that when we're talking about pet trust, usually we're talking about a trust that I'm going to put in someone's will that will take place after the individual dies. And that's called a testamentary trust. So when you're preparing the will, even outside of the trust, you're going to have a provision that specifies who's going to take care of your pet. To whom is your pet going to go? And Linda, talk a little bit more about that, whether you were going to talk about a rescue, we're going to talk about a facility, you want a certain individual or family member or friend to take care of your pet. So we're going to call that the caregiver. You're going to leave the pet itself to someone. But then, and we'll go to the next slide, then in another provision of the will, you're going to set up this trust, this pet trust that designates the individual, again, it's the trustee, to make decisions about how money will be used to take care of your pet after you've died. Now, one thing that's important to consider under the law, The pet trust can only take care of animals that are alive or that have already been conceived. They could be in the belly at the time of your death. So they have to be alive or conceived during your lifetime to be the beneficiaries of this pet trust. You can't make a pet trust that's going to take care of animals in the future that are conceived after you die. Do you name then your particular pets for this trust? It's a good idea. I think some people say, just to make sure there's not some fraud involved, maybe name your pets. But once again, as we already talked about, things are fluid and pets tend not to live, unfortunately, as long as we do. So the pets that you have today may not be the pets that need the care when you die. So you want to be a little flexible about that and specify any pets that I own at the time of my death are going to be taken care of by this pet trust. Next question, how much money am I going to put in it? And that's something you really have to carefully consider. Think about, what do you want the standard of living to be for your pet? I was looking at some stories about pet trusts that had been established in the past, and I saw that Leona Helmsley had left $12 million for her white Maltese named Trouble. So I guess there was a lot of money for Trouble to get into trouble there. Probably most of us are not talking about millions of dollars for our pets, but I know I've had clients who have horses or parrots, for example, that may live a long time, and horses in particular can be very expensive and need a lot of care. So we want to think about what kind of standard of living do we want our pet to have? We want to make sure certainly that we provide for their medical and veterinary care, for their basic needs like food and shelter. And so we need to think about that, think about how much that costs, kind of budget for it. And then think about the fact that there may be inflation involved. Are you going to leave a certain amount of money? Are you going to leave a certain percentage of your estate? These are all options to think about. Other things, do you want to leave a certain amount of money to take care of your pets, the disposition of your pet's remains after the pet dies? Do you want to leave some extra money in case the caregiver needs to do something special to their house, some construction to their house to take care of the pet the way that you would like to? These are just considerations that you should be thinking about. And then we'll go to the next slide, Linda. Most critically, like I said, who do I name as trustee? Is it going to be the same person who's the caregiver? That could be a conflict. You never know. Depends on unique circumstances. It depends on the individuals. It depends on who you trust. I always think of 101 Dalmatians, and hey, naming the and I'm forgetting his name now, but naming the butler to take care of the cats, who then was going to receive the money, to take care of the dogs, I apologize, the Dalmatians, when they died, he had a motivation, obviously, because he was going to get the money after they died. He had a motivation to get rid of them. So not that that's going to happen, but something to think about. Maybe it should be a different person who's good with finances and whose only job is to handle the money. Do you name a successor? And absolutely, you always do. You always want to do that. Also with the power of attorney, name a successor agent, name a successor trustee, because again, you don't want the pet to be left in limbo if the person you've named suffers a health crisis or moves away or has some sort of complication and for some reason can't carry out their duties. So always name a successor, again, someone else you can trust. What happens when the pets die and there's money left over? We call that the remainder. What if all that money hasn't been used? Think about that, because that money needs to be directed some way. Is it going to go to a family member? Is it going to go to a shelter or a rescue? Is it going to go to the Bucks County SPCA? Is it going to be used for some other purpose, continued in trust for another person? So the remainder is what's left over after all the pets that are designated as beneficiaries have died. Do you name somebody who's called a trust director, somebody who can go into court to make sure the trustee is doing what he or she is supposed to do and to enforce that trust. If you don't, anyone who's interested in the pet may file a petition with the court and ask the court to appoint a trust director to enforce the trust. Do you put provisions in there that the trustee can go and inspect on a regular basis or a certain basis from time to time to make sure that the pets are taken care of in the way that you wish them to be taken care of? Is the trustee going to give money directly to the caregiver or just pay the vet, pay the expenses directly without giving money to the caregiver? These are all things to think about. And how do you prepare it? Again, I don't think there's too many pet trusts out there online, pet trust forms. Probably a good idea. It's a little more complicated of a document than a power of attorney. Again, probably a good idea to talk with an experienced attorney about that. And the most important thing that I'll end with for both powers of attorney and trusts, pet trusts, and any type of estate planning documents that you're preparing or estate planning that you're engaged in. I tell all my clients, it's critical to communicate with your family members, with anyone who's going to be involved. It's not a good surprise when there's a time of need and an agent or a trustee has to step up to the plate to find out for the first time that you've been named to take on that important duty. So talk to people in advance. Make sure the person that you want to be your agent or your trustee is willing to do it. The documents can always be changed later if circumstances change, if people change. Sure, you can do that so long as you have the capacity to do that. And sometimes people wait to the last minute and don't get it done. So it's important to start thinking about things, act, make that dreaded trip to the attorney's office and start taking steps to protect and take care of your loved animals if something happens to you. So thanks, Linda. It's your turn now.
Great. That was a fascinating information. I learn a lot every time I hear you, Dianne, and I am very grateful to have you as the president of our board. So I'm going to kind of riff off what Dianne's just said right now. What if, something happens to somebody that you know, and suddenly you're left with their pets? This is a situation that happens a lot to people like me who work in animal welfare, animal sheltering, and animal rescue. We're often dealing with situations where people have pets that they are not able to keep and that they inherited in some way. And so what are some options for people? We've done some really good learning now on planning ahead for your own pets, but what happens when you have mom's pet and mom's pet or dad's pet is not a pet that you actually can keep or can care for some reason? Maybe it's allergies, or maybe the pet doesn't do well with your pets, or maybe it's just not something, you work full-time and you didn't expect to take on a dog or whatever. Not saying that people who work full-time can't have dogs, they can. So I'm going to look at a couple different options. I'm going to kind of talk about private placement, person to person, and then working with shelters and sanctuaries. So we'll start with the bad options, though. I do not recommend, after 38 years actually in this field, free to good home ads or putting animals on Craigslist or, in our area, the Patch, to try to find homes for animals. And abandonment in Pennsylvania and most places is illegal. So let's all skip over those bad things. Let's go to some rehoming ideas that are better. So private placement, many times the pet of a person who might have to move into, a care home or passes away, maybe that pet could go to somebody that pet already knows and likes. That could go to be a friend. I walk once a week with a friend, we walk our dogs together. If something happened to me, that friend might be willing to take on my dog because her dog likes my dog likes her. Maybe it's relatives, maybe children, grown children, or, relatives that know the pet. I have personal experience of that too. My best friend's sister died of cancer. She had 2 cats, and her mother took in the cats, and they were a comfort to her, having lost her daughter, that she was able to have those cats for their lifetimes. So I would say, reach out in advance, or reach out in that situation, talk to friends or relatives. Let's go over the rest of the pros of private placement. You get to interview and choose people. So maybe it's not a friend or relative. Maybe you're going to have to actually find someone unrelated to you and do a private placement person to person. Well, you get to do the interview. You get to do the choices on that and make a selection of where the pets will go. This is generally relatively inexpensive. And there are online communities. We often recommend going to getyourpet.com. There are similar online communities of people that are doing private pet placement, person to person. And there are some assists and controls and forms and things that are available through that sort of thing. Now, there are some cons to private placement. Not only do you get to interview people, you must interview people. That means you have to make a choice and you have to talk to people and make a selection. And that can be hard, harder than you think. Many times when people, love the pet and they're trying to find another home for it, what they're really looking for is themselves. They are looking for someone who talks like them, looks like them, sounds like them, is the same age and came from the same cultural background, which really means that there's a lot of potentially very good homes that they're not even going to consider because they're looking within their own comfort zone. And that's just a natural tendency that most of us have. Whereas you have to kind of break through that and say, I'm looking for a good home for this pet of my mom's, but the person doesn't have to look exactly or be exactly like mom. You will need to have some sort of contract to transfer ownership because, as Dianne referred to, animals are property under Pennsylvania law. And so you will need to transfer that property fully and say this pet on this date, it could be fairly simple, on this date, I'm transferring Coco, describe the pet to this person, both sign it, date it, you can, be better to work with an attorney to come up with a simple contract, but you will need something like that. I know the online communities often provide a contract so that there is a legal transfer of ownership. You have to keep in mind as a con that the placement may not work out. I've been in animal sheltering for a long time, and as good of a job as we try to do with placements, there are always a few that don't work out. We had one that didn't work out today, and the animal came back. And so you have to think about that. What happens if I choose a place for the pet to go and then it doesn't work out and the person wants to bring it back? Are you able or willing to take the animal back? Or are you going to say, you know what, you can rehome the animal. I'm going to allow that if you know someone that you would like to give the pet to, or do you want the pet coming back to you? It can take time to find the right family for the pet. And I often feel for the people that I talk with, because they're calling me, they hadn't expected this, their mother went in the hospital, their mother passed away, and now their mother has, 4 dogs that they have to find homes for, and they have to do it fast because they can't take care of this many. And so people are in a rush. And being in a rush when you're trying to place a pet is not a great idea. You want to be able to take the time. Let's say the first family that responds to your posting on, the online community, you have a real shy, timid cat who, doesn't like a lot of noise and confusion and has lived with an older person for all of its life. And the first family that is interested has, 17 children under the age of 2, and they all jump up and down at the same time. And they're all very excited to see this cat who is terrified. And you're thinking to yourself, maybe look at the next person. So give yourself some time to find the right family and the right fit for the animal. And there can be some cost involved, although I would say that in most of these that I've seen with private placements, the person who bears the cost is the adopter. They're the ones who are paying the fee, not the person placing the animal. So some recommendations: if you're going to do a private placement, take your pet, the pet that you're now responsible for, to a vet, or gather the vet records and the care information. It would be very good to be honest. And write something up about the pet or use the form that we have online available. I'll mention it at the end again, a pet profile that says everything about that you know about the pet. You know, what does the pet eat? What is it like? What does he or she not like? What's kind of exercise? What kind of play? Where does it sleep? All of these kinds of things. Be honest about any behavioral or medical concerns. We place animals all the time at the SPCA that have behavioral or medical issues, but we're upfront and honest about those. And you're gonna, if you're dishonest about it, or if you try to hide things, there's a much higher likelihood of someone being unhappy with the pet and then bringing it back and being disappointed in the whole process. You can ask for references, you know, personal references, a veterinarian, a landlord. You can drive by the person's house or ask to visit the person's house to see where the pet will live and make sure that you're comfortable with that. And again, have a contract ready and make sure that the contract includes whether that pet should be returned if it doesn't work out, or whether rehoming is something that is okay. So private placement, goods, bads, and can be done and is done regularly. Another option would be working with a professional group. And of course, I represent an animal sheltering group, but I'm also speaking here of rescue groups. So both of these organizations, both of these types of organizations, we spend a lot of our time taking in pets and then finding new homes for them. And that is what we do as a profession. And so we take it very seriously. You can select an organization to work with instead of doing the work on your own. You can select an organization that specializes and does a very good job at it. There is, I think, more of a potential for objective placement because they are, I mean, we spend our time looking for qualified, good homes for our animals, and no matter whether people are younger or older or families or, you know, speak English well or not. I mean, our goal is, you know, to be very open and to support people through an adoption process and then be there for them afterwards. Most shelters and rescues have support in place for meeting and identifying and assessing the behavioral and medical needs of the animals in their care. So there's another sort of layer of safety net when you're working with, instead of person to person, you're working through a group that has these things available for the pet. So let's say, you know, we get a little old pet that was owned by a little old person who has passed away, and their family decides to have us take care of the pet and rehome it. That pet might need grooming. That pet might need dental cleaning. That pet might, you know, the cat might never have been tested for feline leukemia or FIV. And let's say it comes up FIV positive. You know, it's possible that, you know, we place cats with FIV. Not all places do, but we've been very successful placing animals with certain medical conditions. Yesterday, in fact, we placed a CH cat. So those are, that can be done. And I think too, they can be a safety net for returns. Make sure to ask the group that you're working with how they handle returns, because every group is different. I mean, we have 100% adoption guarantee, and, you know, we accept returns, you know, right away of any of our animals. Not all groups do that, but that is something I think that is important, is to find out what the return policy is. And I think also it can be a quicker time to adoption sometimes than a private placement. And the reason for that is that people expect to go, they're going to animal rescue groups and to shelters specifically to adopt animals, and they expect that there's going to be some to choose from. And so we get a larger group of people coming through looking for pets, which often translates into a shorter length of stay. I track the length of stay for our animals, and when they go up for adoption, the average length of stay for our cats is 6 days until adoption. For kittens is 24 hours. And for dogs, last month was 16 days. So anything 2 weeks or under is considered, you know, a pretty good short length of stay until adoption. And you don't want that to be really protracted. So that's a good question to ask. So there are some cons of working with shelters and rescues though, too. It can be a long wait time to be admitted. I know that we have waiting lists of animals waiting to come in to our facility, and some rescue groups also have waiting lists. And I think a lot of that is because nowadays shelters and rescues are not euthanizing animals to make room for more animals anymore. We are focusing on finding homes for the animals that we have. And when we find a home for an animal, that opens up a spot for another animal to come in. We're not using euthanasia to open up spots anymore. And so that's a good thing, but it also means that there can be some long waits because you have to wait till animals are adopted. There can be admission fees involved, and they may be zero. Ours is very low. It's generally, we ask $25 for an admission fee, just sort of a token amount, but they can be higher than that. And honestly, some sanctuaries have admission fees that I've heard of that are in the thousands. I think that professionalism and financial stability can be variable among shelters and rescues. Some are very professional and very financially stable, and others are not. So it is good to check that out. And then there's different designs and setups. Rescue groups are generally foster-based, which means that your pet would be living in a home environment until it's placed, which is lovely. And the SPCA is primarily, we have 2 shelters, which are sort of like hospital settings in that there's different wings and different rooms and different areas for different animals. But we also have a very robust foster program with more than 100 foster homes. So we have the ability to put animals in foster care if they need it. But if we have animals that have communicable diseases or special needs that need to be assessed or addressed, those can be available in the shelter. So you can kind of look at that as check out the group. So my recommendations for working with shelters and rescues is research them and visit them and make sure that you're comfortable. Make sure that you think it's clean, that you like the people, that they're good communicators, that you like the way the animals seem comfortable and well cared for. Just visit them, ask them about, do they have time limits on their animals? We don't have any time limits at the SPCA, but that varies from group to group. And ask about, what is the save rate? What is their live release rate? I think generally people are looking for over 90%, and that is great. You can also check out their charity rating on websites like Charity Navigator or GuideStar, which will evaluate their financial stability and whether they are meeting their mission that is stated and have good audits and things like that. So you can use those and look up different organizations online. And you may want to set an appointment either by phone or better yet in person to discuss their program or their process for placing an animal, and ask, how do they handle specific medical or behavioral issues? Are any of them deal breakers for adoption for them? And be very clear to ask, how are returns handled? Are they accepted right away? And that's an important question. So I want to put a quick word in there too about sanctuaries. Sanctuaries are typically lifelong placement for an animal. So they weren't designed to originally be adoption oriented. Some sanctuaries have an adoption component, but primarily they're for animals to live their life out. And I have a picture of horses here because many sanctuaries are for farm animals or for horses, but there are, great in our area, there's a very good cat sanctuary. So a sanctuary setting is for lifelong. They often have higher fees. They may have a long waiting list to get in, but you have to remember, not only are they admitting and caring for the animal, they're caring for the animal for the life of the animal. So there might be maintenance fees involved too. They may keep animals in individually or in small or large groups, and not all animals are the same. Some animals like to be in groups, other animals do not. And if the sanctuary only has animals in large groups and this animal doesn't like to be in with groups of animals, that might not be a great sanctuary to choose for that animal. Financial stability is actually really critical with sanctuaries because as they are making commitments to animals that are there lifelong. As those animals age, their medical bills, just like ours, their medical needs go up. And so the cost of care goes up. And so they have to have a very strong fundraising component in order to continue to provide for the care of aging animals. And again, check out their reviews online. And I have just a couple final helpful tips. If you go to our website, which is buckscountyspca.org, under the tab Get Help, and the second tab, Can't Keep Your Pet, we have downloadable fillable profiles, one for dogs, one for cats, and one for other animals that you can just print out and fill out. And that gives you a great backgrounder for your animal that will describe that pet, whether you're placing it privately or whether you're going to be working with our group or another group. I also wanted to quickly mention outdoor cats. I was just talking with a woman this week on the phone whose mother now has to go into a dementia care home. And she found out that her mother, for the past 5 or 6 years, has been feeding outdoor cats, none of whom are sterilized. And so she has a very large quantity of unsterilized outdoor cats that are also not needed. They're not pets. You can't pick them up and carry them around and put them in your house. They're outdoor cats. So we are seeing this situation more and more with large numbers of cats because they can breed quickly. And so subsidized sterilization groups can be very helpful. But if there are outdoor cats involved with a loved one who has passed away, the first thing to find out is, are they pets? Are they socialized enough that they could go to a rescue group or a shelter to find a new home in a home? Or are they, an indoor outdoor pets, maybe social or not social? Are they already a working animal? Are they living in a barn situation where they're, have a working job like catching mice in exchange for their food? If that's the case, maybe post a flyer at a local feed store looking for another barn for that working animal to be rehomed to. And you can also contact, we have some very good trap, neuter, return to field groups, TNR groups, that may be able to assist with trapping, getting them sterilized and releasing them so that they can still live in the same general area, especially if there are other homes around that are already feeding cats. So those are some things that can help, but I will say non-touchable cats that you can't pick up and are not socialized adult cats, those are generally not the kinds of cats you can bring for rehoming in a shelter or rescue, at least at ours. We would recommend instead TNR. So we have covered a lot of ground here. I don't know if there are any questions, but we both encourage you not only to plan for your own beloved pets, but to think about what might happen to those in your family or your friends who have pets and nobody to take care of that you might end up with, and what you might do to rehome those pets yourself. So thanks for your attention. I don't know if we have questions.
Thank you, ladies. Thank you, Linda and Diane. It was a really educational and very helpful presentation. So I think we do have a question, I believe. Hold on. Nope, I think I was wrong. But if you do have, we have quite a few people that joined the presentation this evening. So if you do have any questions in the next minute or so, if you could put those in the chat, the ladies would be happy to answer those for you. So
and these webinars are recorded and then they're put on our website, the Senior Services Network website of Southeast Pennsylvania. We've had some really great webinars on other topics, all relating to seniors. And so feel free to go to that website. This one isn't going to be up immediately, right? It'll go up in a short period of time, but
a few days, hopefully. Yes.
Yeah, a few days. We have some great webinars already up there on other topics.
We do.
With other speakers.
Wait a minute. I'm not seeing anything yet.
Good. We answered everything, Diane.
You were amazing.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Okay.
I always say there are no dumb questions. I may not be able to answer them, but no dumb questions.
All right, then. So in the meantime, if you could stop your screen, I'm gonna pull back the screen that I had. Thank you. I'm gonna share here. finish up. So Beth, if you could just let me know if there are any questions while I. Here we go. All right, so before we close, I'd like to highlight our upcoming presentations. The next webinar is January 18th on avoiding scams and hackers for seniors with Dennis Mahoney and Anita Campbell. And we do have a very short 3-question survey that we would very much appreciate you completing. This survey will help us plan for future topics and keep us on track for creating content that you want and need. So please let us know what's on your mind, and how we did tonight. And as Dianne, or I'm sorry, as Linda was saying, we do have on our website all of the webinars that we have had in the past. So you can go check those out. So until next time, we look forward to hearing from you and hope that you and your family and your loved ones have a happy holiday season and will join us each month. So thank you very much. And if you have any questions, you can reach out directly to the speakers, to both Dianne and Linda. And we look forward to seeing you in the future.